Okay, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good to be back again. I hope you slept reasonably well. I had that typical first night on retreat sleep, in that I didn't sleep very much until about 3, even though I was comfortably in my own bed. So I want to kick off this morning with an introduction to the retreat, to the material. And maybe just to say a few things in general to frame the retreat. The format for the mornings will remain pretty much the same through the week. So there'll be some input, usually first thing. I'll try and keep it down, try and keep it to 30, 40 minutes, but it will vary depending on if there are questions and if we do a little exercise or something in the middle. And then we'll have a period of sitting, and I'll generally lead that sit. I would think at least lead into it, but maybe lead through it. And then at some point there'll be a little break, just to have a little Zoom break, and then we'll come back and sit again, maybe with a bit more input around that. But the main input will be in these morning sessions, and then the other sessions will have input, but more in the form of led meditation, maybe a little bit more than that. So what I'll be introducing on the whole will be a way of working with mindfulness or awareness, and I'm using those terms synonymously. So working with mindfulness and wisdom, or a Dharma perspective, we can call. So there are various aspects of our experience that we can bring more fully into awareness. So we'll look at those aspects, but more than that, look at the quality of the mind that's aware, the quality of mindfulness and the wisdom in the mind at any given moment. That sense of how we are aware. So I'll talk quite a bit about watching the mind. And just to say at the outset, this is not excluding the body or the physical senses. It's completely inclusive of that. Watching the mind is not about being in the head, and it's not about the thinking mind. I know in different traditions, different Buddhist traditions, mind is sometimes used more closely linked with the thinking mind. Whereas in the early Buddhist tradition, there's a sense of mind being very broad, and thinking is just one of the faculties or capacities that the mind has. There are plenty of others, such as recognizing, perceiving, feeling, imagining, remembering, and knowing and being aware are all faculties and capacities of the mind. Yeah, so one of those faculties, the knowing, is very closely allied with awareness or mindfulness. So that ability to recognize whatever is happening. Sometimes we might feel that knowing it almost feels like a physical quality. We might experience it quite low in the body. And sometimes we might have the habit of equating it more in the head. That's where the knowing or the recognizing comes from. But I think it's helpful to open it up just to explore and well that experience of knowing. What is the experience of knowing or recognizing, being aware? And when we're able to do that in a very relaxed way, it can reveal some of the ideas and perhaps assumptions we have about what the mind is, and perhaps the notion that it happens in the head or it comes from the head. So we can become a bit clearer about the assumptions, the ideas we have about experience, just through being curious about what's actually happening. So in this particular way of working, I'll talk quite a bit about right view and right attitude. I won't say very much today, but a broad way of talking about right view or right attitude is using sort of ideas that are helpful to the mind in being able to recognize things more clearly, be able to recognize with awareness and see things more free from those ideas and assumptions that I was just mentioning. So I'm going to drop in this session just a couple of ideas, hopefully helpful Dharmic ideas that we can use right from the start, using what we already know. If you like, we already have a Dharma perspective working in the back of the minds. If we know anything about the Dharma, there'll be certain ideas that influence how we think about things and how we're able to be with our experience. And to a very strong degree, those ideas in the back of the mind determine our relationship to experience, how we think about it, how we feel about what's happening. So I'll give you a very, very simple example. So just say where you're meditating now. If you've got a lot of noise around, a lot of noise inside your home or outside your home, you might have the idea. So this is one idea in the mind. You might have the idea that you can't meditate properly unless you have quiet, unless it's quiet around you. So that will influence how you relate to those sounds and how much the mind thinks it's capable of, because it's already with that idea of wanting the conditions to be other than they are. It's the setup. You set up some resistance in the mind, just in that wish for it to be different. But if we have a different idea, if we have the idea that mindfulness can be aware of anything, it can know whatever is happening, then we can use the experience of sounds around in a much more neutral way. It's like, oh, this can be helpful to awareness. I can just recognize the hearing, faculty of hearing is happening, that sounds are being known by the mind. So you can see in that very simple example, one idea, which can be quite, we don't consciously think these ideas necessarily, but one is perhaps a habitual one, and it's maybe to do with certain circumstances and certain types of meditation where quiet is a really helpful condition. But if we're just with the experience as it is, okay, and notice the idea that brings about resistance, and this other idea, which is appropriate in this context, because we can take any object to be aware of. So our meditation in that instance becomes, we include the objects, the sound objects, as part of our meditation. So that I say this particular idea one, awareness can know anything in our experience. We can be aware of anything that's happening. So we've got quite a broad focus. It's a bit of a contradiction in terms. We have a broad playing field for the mind and body. We can be aware of whatever's happening with a broad, spacious awareness. So one of the things that we're always looking to do in meditation is to have some degree of samadhi in the mind, some degree. And the degree necessary will differ from practice to practice. We often translate samadhi as concentration, but it can also be translated as something like stability of mind, or even relaxation, deep relaxation and stability of mind. So in this particular practice, which is very broad and uses a lot of different objects and is therefore quite accessible if we're practicing at home or practicing with a lot of different objects of experience, a lot, I would say, things to do with our work, things to do with our family, or looking after ourselves in terms of cooking, or doing the washing during the week. So that broad basis is really helpful. So there's a line in the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness, where he says, we establish mindfulness to the extent necessary for bare knowing and continuous mindfulness. We establish mindfulness to the extent necessary for bare knowing and continuous mindfulness. So we're not looking to cultivate a very strong concentration. We're looking to develop enough stability in the mind for bare knowing and continuous mindfulness to be able to be present. So in the Pali commentaries, not the Pali Suttas, but the commentaries that came a few hundred years later, there's this term, Karnika Samadhi. So Karnika Samadhi is translated as momentary concentration. So rather than the concentration that's unified around a single object, for instance, the breath, as we have as the aim of the mindfulness of breathing practice. Karnika Samadhi, if you like, we unify that stability of mind around the awareness itself. The mindfulness has stability, but the objects can change. In fact, they are changing. The attention is drawn to different objects, but it takes awareness with it. So in that sense, awareness can know anything and still be, if you like, strengthening itself, building more mindfulness and more stability of mind through that process of knowing different objects. So one implication of this is that growing mindfulness, the stability of mind, irrespective of a particular experience, a particular object, is that there's no one object that's better than another. So it might be that what your experience, perhaps your predominant experience, is of a negative mental state, a difficult mind state, anger or disappointment, whatever it is. It could be that, or it could be a really loud, unpleasant noise outside. But it's still possible to use those objects as a way to help awareness stabilize, help mindfulness grow. So that's perhaps familiar to some of you, I'm sure, and perhaps a little bit different for some others. It can help the mind be quite relaxed. There isn't any one thing that, if you like, we're looking to pin the attention to. But it's like, where is the mind going? What is its interest? And can awareness, if you like, just accompany where the attention is going? So, yeah, the implication is also there for daily life practice. So I think there's quite a number of different conditions different people have. I know that some people are able to just take the week as a week's retreat, probably stay at home most of the time. And for others, there's going to be, you know, maybe several days work or different types of responsibilities. So what I'd just like to drop in is to really try not to make a conflict out of your conditions, whatever they are. Particularly if you're feeling like, oh, I'd really like to be more on retreat, more properly on retreat. And we can have ideas about what a proper retreat is that also can be influencing our experience. It's not, if we're not quite on retreat as much as we want to be or ought to be, then that can also just set up a sense of dissatisfaction in the mind. I remember a talk by an order member called Dheera Nandi about 20 years ago on an order convention. And she was talking about quality of the fourth jhana, and it was the quality of Prashrabdi. And I don't think Prashrabdi is here. We have an order member now called Prashrabdi, but the translation, or one of the translations of Prashrabdi, is serenity, and this is associated with the fourth dhyana, which is of course a state of very high concentration. But what her particular translation of it was, this quality of serenity came from doing what needed to be done. So not opposing, not resisting what needs to be done, but actually it's just another opportunity to be aware. To be aware of the thing itself, the interaction with your child or your elderly mother, or the work emails you have to do, and also a chance to observe as a different object any resistance or any wishing it to be otherwise. So what else? So this sense of awareness, knowing anything. So whatever we're doing, there's that opportunity to be aware of it, even just for moments, and even for moments in the busyness of cooking lunch for you and your family. Yeah, whatever it is, can even just for moments let that stability of mind grow from awareness, just knowing what's happening, knowing different objects that are available through the senses. If you're cooking, then there'll be smells, for sure. There'll be different smells, there'll be different touches, there'll be different visual objects. So all this is going on regardless of whether we're sitting on our cushion or not. And that opportunity to know it is there. And we can train ourselves in increments, if you like, to just recognize those moments. Oh, I'm actually present, I'm here. Maybe you didn't do anything to have that happen, but recognizing that you're already present. I was remembering a story I heard a long time ago when the meditation teacher David Smith was he was involved in Triratna, and he was also running classes in Birmingham when I was living in Birmingham. So some people here will remember these classes. And he used to run a day retreat a month in his home, and he talked about his practice while watching TV. And he was a great football fan. I can't remember his team, what team he liked, but he described how he would watch his mind, how he would be continuously aware while watching his team, and using that as a practice noticing where awareness was lost because there was a strong involvement in the game. You know, he'd get lost in the story and the content of what was happening, and other times he would just be able to settle back and, if you like, know the outsides of the screen, know that it was a TV that he was watching, so recognizing that seeing was happening, recognizing the sensations of excitement or the opposite, depending on how his team was doing, recognizing that identification with my team. So all this, there's so much that can be noticed if we have the right ideas to support this sort of knowing, and if you like, the training or the habit to recognize what's happening in the present moment. Yeah, so some of you will know I've sat quite a bit in Burma with the Burmese teacher Sayadaw U Tejaniya, and he talks about, if you like, aiming for 50-50 in terms of our awareness being inside or what we're recognizing in the world around us through our senses. And I think usually we're probably about 90% out there, and there's really not that much sort of reflexive awareness of our internal processes, recognizing how the mind, how the body are responding. So we have a lot of emphasis in practice in general, I think, in settling back into our own experience of body, mind, and what's happening. I think the exception to that 90-10 one is perhaps when we're on our own and when we're lost in thought, when there's a lot of thought going on, but not awareness of thinking. And then we can be almost entirely interned to the extent that we don't really, we're not really quite aware of what's happening around us. So we might be perhaps on a walk in nature. So there's a lot of beauty around, people with their dogs, but if there's something going on within us, quite often we can not notice it, or have a very superficial noticing of it because we're caught in what's happening internally. So maybe let's do just a little exercise now, just a brief one, perhaps around sound, around the sense of internal and external, which in the greater scheme of things, of course, are concepts, which we'll come on to perhaps when we look at the skandha of perception. But for now, just notice any sounds in your environment now. And if there aren't sounds, you can't notice sounds, then just use my voice as a sound object. And relax into that knowing of sound. Whatever it might be. So I can recognize a couple of different sounds around me, including the wind in the trees outside the cabin. So what you might notice that sense of relaxing into, if you like, it's an internal relaxing into hearing happening. the fact that hearing is already happening without us doing anything except being present to it. And with that relaxation into the knowing of a sound, there probably will be some labeling of it, but there might not be. If you like, the sense of labeling might be a bit looser. But sometimes you might notice the mind reaching out towards a sound. There's perhaps a little bit more strain. Maybe there's, I want to know what that sound is, or I want to hear it better because I like it. Or a sense of just trying to figure it out. You might also notice the label, the conceptual label, the naming of a particular sound object. Oh, it's the wind, it's a plane, it's the neighbour's lawnmower. And notice that it's not that we're not trying to make that not happen. It's a function of perception, so it will be happening. The labeling, perhaps an imputing of distance. And that can contribute to a little bit of strain, reaching out to the neighbour 2 doors down who's got their lawnmower on. So the mind can know all of this. Awareness can recognize that softening, relaxing into knowing sound. More the direct experience of the sound as it's known by the mind in the moment. And equally, the awareness can recognize that reaching out to sounds or pushing away if we don't want them, and the various conceptualizations around any particular sound. And see if you notice a difference in the quality of those two experiences. The relaxing into the experience of hearing already happening, and perhaps that more active listening, reaching out. Don't worry if you don't recognize these two. Just let's see if there's some interest in the territory, and it may be that another time when you're just sitting quietly you become aware of a difference. Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Let's leave you with that one and we'll move on. So another idea that it can be very helpful in terms of that Dharma framework in the back of the mind So it's the quality of sampajanna, the quality of clearly knowing. And as an aspect of this, Bhante talks about a clear comprehension of our purpose. He says of this quality of sampajanna, he says, we know what we're doing and we know how it relates to our overall spiritual purpose. So there's a sense of a direction in the mind, a sense of a direction that supports our overall spiritual goals. Sometimes I think of it as like a rudder on a boat, a spiritual rudder that's in a way constantly sort of making little adjustments just to help keep me in the direction of openness or freedom or truth or awareness. There's many, many different qualities that you could put in there. And this can be in a macro sense, our overall life choices, this rudder, this direction works, or these micro moments or mini moments in practice, perhaps when we're sitting or when we're walking. So in awareness, where there's a sense of what's necessary here, what would be helpful in this moment to support awareness, to support kindliness and spaciousness. So I think this faculty, this quality of clearly knowing and this comprehension of purpose can help us in terms of making choices about how we use the week. Does any particular action, is it in keeping with our overall sense of purpose, our overall sense of the direction that we're going in? And if I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but it's that continuity of purpose is not necessarily a straight line. It can be a very dog-legged route, but you can have the overall feel like, okay, so this reading this thriller is perhaps not the best, it's not the most direct route to enlightenment, but in this moment it supports relaxation when I can't sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning. So there's certainly lots of space for rationalization, but there's also lots of space for just feeling into what would be helpful in this moment on this dog-legged route to awakening. So one of the things I wanted to mention in this area was technology, our use of technology. Of course, it's inevitable on an online retreat. We're all using our technology right now. But I think there can be, and because of that, if you like, we're in an intermediate realm. It's not like being on retreat where we just put it aside and don't really have to think about it or make choices or even necessarily feel that urge or impulse to use it. I guess you might. I guess you might use your phone on retreat, but you could perhaps just think about your habits around technology, around your phone, around your computer, and use that question: what's necessary? What's helpful? What's necessary? What's doable in the sense of not making a big rule for yourself, but something that you perhaps might be interested to experiment with. So it might be something as simple as if you have your phone in your room with you overnight, maybe even sleep with it next to you, so it's the first thing that you see in the morning, more or less. You might decide to put your phone in another room. You might decide to turn it on later during the day. You might need to have it on all the time, but if you don't, then we can make wise choices there that just extend us a bit. I think the last retreat I did, I was saying, I think I just was very clear about not using social media and not looking at news sites. And actually that's a minor, it's not a particularly ambitious goal, but it did make a difference to the quality of my mind. Yeah, look at not maybe putting an email holiday thing on, which I know some of you have done already, but something that allows you to notice maybe that the habits, and that certainly the habits of wanting, the habits of compulsivity around our technology. So you reflect, you choose. Well, I think it can be just surprising how quite small habits have a positive impact on feeling of freedom. I think we can have a lot of unnoticed addiction to our tech that's built up over time, and that has consequences on our minds and directly on our meditation as well. One of the things I've been reading about has been, in a way, the impact of how technology can mean that we're never really alone. There's always this feeling of being a little bit connected, which can be a very good thing. But in terms of just relying on our own resources and being willing to be in solitude, inner solitude. We might be living with somebody else, but that sense of an inner solitude can be very helpful, reliant on our own resources. So notice if you do decide to sort of, if you like, ring fence certain behaviors and give yourself a bit more freedom by deciding that you're not going to act on certain habits or you're going to change certain habits. See if you can be really curious about the impulse to act on those habits. Let it arise, perhaps as a feeling of wanting, or a thought that, oh, it doesn't make much difference. Whatever it is, notice those thoughts and impulses in awareness. So we'll look a bit more at, not at the area of technology, but we'll look a bit more, when we look at the skanda of mental formations or volition in a few days, that noticing the impulses to act can be very, very helpful, seeing them in awareness. Okay, so oh yeah, so just the other, I suppose there are some other things that can take up a lot of space in the mind. So TV, reading, radio. And again, these might depend on family circumstances. It might be that's your child or your elderly parent needs a bit of company at certain times, and perhaps the best way to do that for them is for you to sit and watch a program with them. So be like David Smith in that case. It's not a question of doing or not doing, but if that is what needs to be done, see if you can, even at moments, have that perspective of, oh, present. I know that I'm sitting. I can feel the sitting. I can know that I'm seeing what I'm seeing. So we have a much bigger sense of what's happening than just all the attention sort of being sucked into the visual stimulus. So maybe just a couple of things about the program and how to use the retreat before I stop. So make as much of the program as you can, and also don't worry about what you can't make. There are recordings if you want to catch up to sessions that you've missed, and Vajradevi is going to break them up, I think helpfully, so you'll know which is an input session and which is a led meditation. Yeah, so yeah, if you don't have a lot of time, you might be able to make up you know, one or the other of those. Apart from last night, we won't record the evening sessions, but we'll put the pujas on the Padlet thing, and as I said, the first names of the poems, or possibly sometimes the whole of poems. And the chat, maybe just to say something about the chat, it's great to use, and at certain times you can put questions in there. I'm not great at multitasking around technology, so sometimes I noticed this last night, things were going into the chat as I was speaking, and I at best could take in half of what was said. So Vajradevi will probably be picking up a lot more of those than I am, but if I don't respond, that's why. So perhaps if we don't have questions, too many questions flying about while I'm speaking, I think I'd find that helpful. But do feel free to use it outside of that time. Yeah, so how to use the retreat. So I'm aware of my own experience of when I have sometimes have input on retreat. Can be a bit of conflict between where my own practice is going and what I'm hearing, perhaps particularly in led meditations. So just really to encourage you to stay with your own experience, and for your own experience to be primary. It's always primary, but I think we can get a little bit conflicted around it. And many of you have a lot of experience to go with, to trust. And hopefully some of what I say, some of these Dharmic ideas will have an effect, but very much on the basis of your own practice and what's helpful for you. So yeah, I've written here, don't try and take your mind where it doesn't want to go. And the irony is that this practice is so much about letting the mind go where it wants to go, where it's already going. But it's still possible to feel that we have to try and get it to go somewhere. So regardless of the nuts and bolts, there are many, many different ways of doing mindfulness practice, awareness practice, formless practice, just sitting. But I think one of the most helpful things this practice can offer, well, I think there are two things. One is this emphasis on the Dharma perspective, on, in a way, that reflexive attitude towards what's happening. A questioning attitude towards, oh, there's, yeah, recognizing something is happening, and in a way being able to see that a bit from a little bit more of an objective perspective, from a Dharma perspective, rather than necessarily from, or when we're in the middle of something, we're in the middle of, say, watching we're caught up in our team and our team winning on use the football analogy again, we often can't see other things. So much of the attention is focused on that. So that emphasis on the broader perspective, Dharma perspective, combined with receptivity, combined with yeah, that sense of settling back, opening to, well, what else? Okay, so there's this team and this winning or losing team. What else? is happening? And that question can just open out and allow awareness to do what it does best, which is take things in, take experience in, knowing it clearly. So I said I'll be talking about awareness, mindfulness, right view, right attitude, the skandhas, and various other things. And there's just masses that could be said about those. And we have time for nuggets, I think a few nuggets. But I think what's helpful to bear in mind is that we don't need a lot. We don't need everything. We don't need loads of input. We just need enough of some ideas that allow us to be with our experience in a helpful way. We need enough of the ideas that support watching the mind with awareness and wisdom. So for most sessions, there'll be, or most of the morning sessions, at some point there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. But also at times I'll ask you in the big group how your practice is going, and it's nice to hear from just a few people anyway, what landed for them in the meditation, what caught their interest, where perhaps you felt you were just quite aware, quite present for moments, whatever you were aware of. So there'll be those opportunities, and then of course we've got the groups this afternoon as a chance to really just check in with whatever's going on for you in your life, but also it's an opportunity to talk about your meditation practice, your relationship perhaps to meditation, your relationship to awareness. And then there'll be the reviews starting tomorrow. There'll be these practice chats, which I'll probably say a little bit more about tomorrow. So that's enough. That's enough talking. So maybe there's just, if there are any questions of maybe clarification for now, just because I've been talking for a while, and I think particularly on Zoom, it's quite helpful, yeah, just to keep a handle on how much overall we're taking in, we're listening to. But any questions of clarification before we have a little leg stretch? Sit. So Vajradevi, I'm sort of relying on you because I can't see anybody with their hands up. Maybe if you yeah, feel free to unmute.
Moksha-Gandhi, do you want to unmute? Moksha-Gandhi, you can unmute. Yeah.
Hi, Vajradevi. You were talking about ideas. Are they the same as views?
I can't hear you, Moksha-Gandhi. Okay, you're muted now. Try unmuting again.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, it is in, isn't it? Oh, where's it gone? Sorry about that. That's very unmindful of me. I thought it was in my ear the whole time. I don't know how that happened. Sorry about that. Again.
You were talking about ideas. Are they the same as views? Would you call them? Could you
Yeah.
views as well?
I suppose you could. Yes, I'm talking about right view. Yeah. So views quite often are perhaps more habitual. More things that are implicit in the mind that we don't necessarily realize that we hold until they're challenged, or until we spot them in awareness. But I suppose ideas could be something that's perhaps a little bit more consciously held as something that's a helpful it's a helpful way of seeing for the mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's have a leg stretch, maybe just 2 or 3 minutes before we sit, and then we'll have a longer break for a drink, a pee after that. So just, yeah, just a couple of minutes to stand up and stretch your legs even. So having given you a couple of ideas, Dharma ideas, the ideas are definitely need to be underpinned by our practice of noticing our direct experience. So as I said, the ideas might work away in the background, but and then they'll come to experience, hopefully, when they're needed, or they'll impact on the way that we're noticing experience, way that we're looking. You don't have to consciously sort of think of them necessarily. Oops. So we'll sit for just about half an hour. And I suggest you sit in a really natural way.
I hear you, Vajradevi.
Sorry?
Volume seems to have changed.
Sorry, what's changed?
Your volume changed when you were, but it's come back now.
Well, it wasn't quite plugged in firmly enough, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Now.
Let's try. I'll try it again, but thank you. How is that? Is it still okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
So I want to just drop in some of the qualities of sati, of mindfulness, that can help support this breadth of awareness that helps us know any or many different experiences, objects arising one after another. So I'll drop in some of those qualities. Emphasis on relaxation. And sometimes, for some people, relaxation sounds like it should be a good thing, but for sometimes it can. Yeah, I think it can be helpful to have the eyes open in order to keep a feeling of groundedness. In a funny way, it can support more relaxation, to have a sense of orientation in the space. So if you have a sense that it's more relaxing, that there is more ease, then experiment with the eyes being open and soft, and perhaps allowing them to rest on something. And sometimes also when there's perhaps a tendency in the mind to focus in very strongly on parts of our experience. And that can produce tension. So in this case as well, it might be that just being with sounds can be more helpful than, say, the body or the breath. When we sit, we're not looking to hold ourselves in any particular frame of body or mind. Be aware if there's any sense of clicking into meditation gear. And sit in a natural way. Let the body be natural. Let the mind be natural. And we're looking to know what's happening through body and mind in their natural state. And taking time for the awareness to come to the body. Allowing awareness to settle, to inhabit that sense of physical presence, different sensations. Awareness is accompanying whatever is already happening within the body and with sounds around. Notice how awareness moves from one part of the body to another, quite naturally. Picking up different sensations of pressure or temperature, of tension or ease and relaxation. The job of awareness is simply to notice what's happening in the present moment. With a kindly, spacious awareness. And whenever you remember, awareness will already be there. The remembering works with sati, with mindfulness. Remembering and reminding. Noticing the awareness that's present. And noticing what it's present to. Perhaps sensations of movement in the body, connected with the breath, not looking for the breath to be any particular way, but just being aware of those sensations as they appear. Settling back like in a big physical and mental armchair, settling and resting while remaining present, curious. What's happening now? What is awareness knowing? And not so interested in the content, but in the processes of mind and body. Knowing sounds, knowing that hearing is happening. Knowing sensations as they appear in many different ways through what we call the body. And those sensations, movements connected with process of breathing. Just settling into these realms of experience. You might go from one to another, or you might find that primarily you're anchored in sound or sensation. experience might feel quite simple, quite ordinary. And that's fine. We appreciate that we can be aware of it. Not much needs to happen for awareness to be knowing and recognizing and becoming stronger and more continuous. On the whole, with awareness, we're not looking to change or to interfere with whatever is happening. We're looking to try and bring about the conditions for awareness and wisdom to grow. At times you might notice the interfering mind that wants to change what's happening. It wants something else, something better, something more to happen, or something else to go away. For there to be less sleepiness or restlessness or grumpiness. So it's not necessary to try and act on those wishes, those thoughts, those impulses. Let's see if they too can be held and known in awareness. whatever is happening is enough. It's enough that sati, mindfulness, can know it. Can know it as a process of the mind or of the body.